What's going on, folks? Welcome to 4th and 16 Sports. My name is Ellis Talbert. We're coming to you live here from Pronk Studios in Greenville, South Carolina. I hope you guys are all having a great Tuesday night. A lot of good stuff to talk about. Clemson recruiting, the ACC. Some changes are going to be made in the 2020 season, or we hope to see it. And those Golden Dome Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We want to try to get them into the ACC, but not just for this year. We want to see what we can do going on. So again, thanks folks for watching. Appreciate everyone that supports us. Of course, we are streaming live from 4th and 16 Page, Seldom Used Reserve, and The Roar. We're coming to you from Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We added YouTube in again because we want to start doing some things there. So have an extra place to bring more football. We always love that. I got my main man, Drew Yinser, in the back, and I got my main man, Faxon Childress, on the cameras. Let's go.
Excited to be here, excited to talk about Clemson.
Yeah.
Payton Page, I think, is going to be the first topic today.
That's right.
Recent commit.
That's right. We're going to go ahead and talk about Payton Page, commitment from Clemson that just happened about an hour ago. So we're going to get into that too. Again, thanks to everyone that supports 4th and 16 Sports. From all the people who've been with me since the Twitter days, the early Twitter days, the podcast days, and now the fact that we have my ugly mug on the face of this screen right now that you're looking at. I appreciate you guys so much. We got some cool cakes here. Some awesome stuff going on. It's got the logos. I don't know if you guys see that, all that good stuff. But again, we got that courtesy of one of our good friends of the show. Again, thank you guys for supporting us. And we're going to get started. Now, first things first, Clemson just got another big-time recruit, 4-star defensive tackle out of Dudley High School, Greensboro, North Carolina, Payton Page. Payton Page is one of those guys that you look at and you're like, man, this guy is going to come in and be able to play, get some playing time immediately. We said that stuff about guys like Brian Brzee. We said it about guys like, Travis Etienne. We're going to see this same type of production out of this guy. It was down to Tennessee, North Carolina, and Clemson. And I'm not going to rag on them, but straight up he said, one of the first things he said was, I want to go to a school where the education is going to, that's all I got to say. We knew it was Clemson from that spot. So now we got another recruit in the 2021 class. Of course, we did lose Jordan Hancock just a couple weeks ago, did commit to Ohio State, so that is a done deal. We also lost Corey Foreman early on in the year. He wanted to just decommit, just to go and see things, and then coronavirus happened, so he's not really going to get to do the things he wanted to do. He did include Clemson back into his top 5 or whatever, but we'll see. This type of guy, though, is one of those guys that's going to help the defensive line immediately. He's going to join Cade Denhoff. Who else is here? Some crazy guys. Zaire Patterson. You already got a big-time guy in Barrett Carter. So at this point, I'm thinking that Clemson's going to rock and roll status quo as usual. What do you think about that, Fax?
Listen, this is a big get for Clemson. The 21 recruiting class is now, I think, 3rd or 4th in the country, I think, and number 1 in the ACC. He's going to join a bunch of defensive recruits. We can just go down the list. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Eagles legend, his son is coming in, 4-star linebacker. Barrett Carter, 4-star linebacker. He's going to join him on the defense as well. Payton Page is the newest addition. He's going to join Cade Denhoff. We've also picked up Zaire Patterson. So like
Zaire Patterson, like I said,
the front 7 commits that we've been getting in this 21 class are really. It's going to be like a 2016-esque class when they're all in their senior year, I want to say. And the defensive line is really going to be the strong suit of the Tigers 3 and 4 years down the road, I want to say. And last year in the national championship game and in the playoffs in general, I think we could both agree that the defensive line did struggle. And the defensive line kind of got dominated in the trenches, and you can't win football games like that. But I'm really expecting the defensive line to have a bounce back this year with Brzee and all the other recruits getting added, and then just looking forward to the 21 class. I mean, we're going to be stacked on the D-line again.
Absolutely stacked. And that's one of the more important things going on. We saw last year, and I think Fax alluded to that, you saw the defensive line not necessarily get pushed around, but it was just a different type of format. Clemson had to do different kind of looks up front just because that was not the strength of the defense last year. It was more of the linebacking crew, especially with a guy like Isaiah Simmons, and the secondary. You had a couple of guys go pro, one in the first round in the top 15, so 2 in the top 15. So it's one of those deals where I think this is now going to make Clemson a more well-rounded defense looking forward to this type of player. He's 6'4", 360 pounds. Now, some of that is baby weight, and he knows that too. He's going to get in there in that Joey Batson weight room, get trimmed up a little bit. I can still see him playing around 330, 320. And at a kid that size, you add 290 with Brzee. You add 260, 270 with a guy with some of those other guys, like Xavier Thomas, who's going to be in this 270 range. KJ Henry's up there. Clemson's D-line is going to be stout yet again. So for everyone that thought Clemson, and I've already said this, I've already came out in front of the screen and did all that crazy, goofy stuff. For anyone who thought that Clemson was cycling out, yeah, you had fun because Clemson did lose a couple of players. It's not like Clemson never will ever have a decommitment. But again, this is status quo. Clemson now is reloading with top and high caliber players. And that's just not orange colored glasses. You have to be an objective person to be able to see that Clemson is still doing their thing. It's not going to change anything. So I'm excited to get a player like this. Again, 247 composite guy, national 80th ranked guy, 7th defensive tackle, number 4 player in North Carolina. Of course, we did get the number 1 player in Will Shipley, running back out of North Carolina, Weddington as well. So again, super excited about this player.
Yeah, and when you look at Clemson's recruiting class
crazy.
the 21 recruiting class is actually better than the 20 recruiting class. So people are talking about cycling out. Composite rating, 94.33 for the, if you guys don't know what that means, pretty much that's out of a 100 scale on 247, and that's the main recruiting site. And the previous year it was 93.45. So, and Clemson has 14 hard commits already, and those are all 94 out of 100. That's what they pile up to. Number 1 in the ACC, number 4 in the country. The Tigers are not going anywhere. Elite recruiting from Dabo Swinney and the staff at Clemson, and going to be a great defense for a long time.
I can't wait to see what guys like Todd Bates and Lemansky Hall can do with guys like Dudley and things like that. So Payton Page. So again, super excited about that. And two, another thing that Fats brought up, and we want to make sure we pound it in your head that you understand. Don't ever look at the amount of recruits that a team has. You can have 40 recruits. That doesn't matter. If your average star, if your average rating is like 70, 80, you got a bunch of decent players. You got a bunch of 3- and 4-star players. But Clemson has smaller, better classes. Clemson's classes on, again, he said 0.94. That's that's a scale of 100. I mean, you're talking about a team that is consistently reloading at the most important places too. So
yeah, and since I just wanted to bring up an example, since Clemson is number 4, when you look at the number 5 team, it's actually the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee is the perfect example of what you're saying. They have a lot of recruits, but these guys aren't as upper echelon as the Clemson recruits. So they are the number 5 team behind Clemson in the recruiting class. Their average rating is an 89 compared to Clemson's 94, but the reason why they're so high, they have 24 commits for that class instead of Clemson's 14. So it's just one of those things where the Tigers have these really high-quality guys, and teams like Tennessee, there's no fault to them. They're bringing in some great talent themselves, but they're bringing in a bunch of lower-tier guys to boost their rating. That's not the case with the Tigers. The cream of the crop are coming to Clemson.
That's right. And again, just super excited. Folks, if you enjoy what you're seeing so far, you like 4th and 16, you support us 4th and 16 all this time, go bring a friend right now. Tell them to watch the show. Share this, like this. Create a watch party with me. Let's have some fun. It's Tuesday. All we get to hear about all week on TV is the coronavirus and mass this and left and right. We don't want to hear any of that. We want to just talk about football, and we're going to have some fun. So let's go ahead and do me a favor. Go ahead and like and share this if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe. Hit that notification button. Let us know. I hate that it makes me cringe to say that, but that's what you got to do. And also get into the comment section tonight. We want to know how you feel about some of these things. We want to know how you guys feel about a guy like Payton Page coming into Clemson. Again, 6'4", 360-pound, 4-star defensive tackle out of North Carolina has committed to Clemson over North Carolina and Tennessee. So, but again, I will say facts. Hats off to North Carolina and Tennessee. What they're doing on the recruiting trail is actually a pretty big deal.
It's very good for their programs.
It's a good deal.
It's good for their programs, and it's going to take their programs up a level for sure. It's just not really comparable to what teams like Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. Those are really the top 3 when it comes to recruiting, and I would even go as far as saying Oregon is up there as well.
I think so too.
They dominate the Pacific Northwest, so those teams are kind of like tier 1. And you're going to see teams like Tennessee, North Carolina in that tier 2 range because they're getting a lot of players to come in. Credit to them. It's great for their schools.
Yeah. And in the long run, it'll be great for Clemson. We want more teams to recruit like Clemson, and North Carolina seems to be doing that. At first, they were really roaring. They're still doing great things in the recruiting class. But we still want to see that on the field. We know what Clemson can do, what they've done with less. Remember, folks, Clemson's never had a number 1 recruiting class. I mean, very far few and far between having top 5 wins. So 2 national championships out of that too. So just remember that. So again, I just want everyone to understand that Clemson's not going anywhere when it comes to the recruiting front, when it comes to anything Clemson football, as long as Dabo Swinney and company are there. I know a lot has been made of him over the summer, but it's mostly because people are just bored and have nothing else to talk about. But we're going to move on from that, and we're going to talk about something that involves the Clemson Tigers as well, the ACC. Now, we know that the ACC is going to be transitioning this year into trying to find a way how to make college football season work, albeit looking a little bit different. Of course, you've already seen the Pac-12 and the Big Ten go rogue, say they're going to play college football within their conference only. That's changed a lot of things in the landscape of college football, particularly for some schools that are FCS, Group of 5. They're without a teams. Now, you got also other conferences that are dealing with some things. You've got the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC are still trying to figure out what they're going to do. And this is where we're going to talk about tonight, because there's a lot of different factors that go into what's going to happen. There's a lot of different things that have to be accounted for. And right now, quite frankly, I think everyone is dragging their feet on it. We could see a decision as early as tomorrow, maybe Friday, maybe next week. We'll see what happens. I feel like they're in a kicking the can race with the NCAA. They also have to make a ruling as well. I think what we're seeing, facts, is the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC are trying to stave off long enough so that they don't have to be responsible for a potential lack of football in the fall this year. And so is the NCAA. Mark Emmert and the NCAA just does not want to make a decision on anything. But we'll get into it tonight. There are some factors here and there that we're going to get into throughout the night. And one of the last sections of that, one of the most important parts, is Notre Dame. What do we do with them? So we're going to start with the ACC and their scheduling issues. Of course, the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12, that's one of they're trying to figure out if they want to go to a conference-only play type deal. Of course, they don't want to go as crazy conference-only as the Big Pac-12 and the Big Ten. Those teams are exclusively playing teams within their conference. But it's funny, now that we think about it, and we've talked about this too when we did the conference predictions and doing the conference shakeup, adding teams here and there. It's interesting that the ACC and the SEC only play 8 conference games, whereas the Pac-12 and Big Ten all play 9 games. So it's going to be very important to see how Clemson does this. One of the things that they do, the ACC, not just Clemson, but the ACC is looking at potentially doing a 8+1, which is 8 conference games plus 1 non-conference, or a 10+1, which is 10 games, all ACC, and 1 non-conference. So this is very important. We're going to dive into that. Again, I want you guys to get in the comment section, give us your thoughts on this. There's going to be a lot to debate on this. There's a lot of hot button stuff to really get into when we talk about this. So let's look at an 8+1 type schedule. Obviously, an 8+1 schedule means you're taking 3 games off the schedule. That would normally be occupied by an extra Power 5 team and a FCS team. Clemson likes to play a lot of in-state schools as well as a Group of 5 school, and then a Power 5 non-con, in addition to South Carolina. If we're looking at that, you could still have an 8-game conference situation because Clemson would still be playing everyone in their division. You could add 2 to 3 teams over in the other side, 2 teams from the other side, and Notre Dame, since they are technically non-conference as of now with the ruling with Notre Dame in the ACC. But then that does not leave room for South Carolina, the rival. So that's very important. Obviously, most Clemson fans want to play that game. I can't quite say the same for South Carolina fans, and that's not even ragging them. But, you know, it's strange because if you do an 8-game, you allow them to have a bye week, something that's very important in college football. A lot of people don't really think about this, but this is where rehab comes. This is when any kind of injuries that are needing to be tended to are dealt with. This is where you can get extra film on the team that you're playing the next week. It's very important to have bye weeks, off weeks in the college football game. Unfortunately, if we go to a 10+1, which would be essentially you're playing 6 teams on your division, you're playing 4 others from the others. The problem is, how do you fit in South Carolina in that situation? That's where the 10+1. South Carolina could be added to that, if I'm not mistaken, and that, again, includes Notre Dame. This is where Notre Dame makes this whole thing fuzzy, and we want to see if they can get in. Now, Fax, I'm going to ask you a question about this. And I want you to answer as objectively as possible.
Okay.
Folks, if you're out there, ask yourself this question too and answer in the comment section. We're going to put this plain and simple. Does Notre Dame need to be in the ACC?
Yes. Notre Dame does need to be in the ACC. And right now, they're really kind of, I don't want to say they're cheating the system, but they're being extremely unorthodox about how they're handling the whole situation. I mean, they're in the ACC for every single other sport except for football. That's not a normalcy. They are the outlier here, and they are in the wrong, in my opinion. You need to commit to play in the conference that you play every other sport in, and especially in a time of a global pandemic where everything's getting super complicated, there is no better time to finally just come out and commit to playing in a conference than now. And I understand where they're coming from a money perspective, which is why they want to stay independent. And I get that part of it, but it makes the most sense for everyone, including themselves at this point, to just commit to playing in the ACC for football. And I don't want to say that I think it'll happen this season, but I think that this is the best chance that we have of Notre Dame getting fully integrated into the ACC.
Well, see, it's going to be very important that Notre Dame does get fully integrated, especially this season, because it's just going to change completely how Clemson and Florida State and Louisville and North Carolina and everyone goes about recruiting. Not recruiting so much. Yeah, actually it will. But it'll change a little bit how things are happening in football as far as scheduling. Again, scheduling is very important. If you're having 10 games, if you're going with a 10+1 and you're including Notre Dame and South Carolina, so that what that does is gives you a full ACC slate that's essentially playing conference-only football with South Carolina as well as the rivalry. Now, this is going on for a lot of different schools. A lot of different schools want to have that rivalry. You're talking about Florida, Florida State, Louisville, Kentucky. There's a lot of those kind of games. In fact, there's 12 games out of the 39 that they'll be playing in those conferences. 12 of those games will be cross-conference between ACC and SEC, so that's very important. Big 12, we're trying to figure out what's going to happen with them. Todd Bowlesby, their AD, or the conference commissioner, actually decided that they're going to wait until everybody else does theirs. They're going to try to drag their feet a little bit slower. I think everybody's trying to, the Big 12 and the SEC are trying to, push the ACC to be the first to make the model of what these teams are going to go with. Again, you cannot include the Pac-12 and the Big 10. Those teams, those conferences have just gone ahead and say we're not going to play anyone outside of these conferences. So it's very important. I just saw earlier today Iowa State had a game with their in-state rival in Iowa. They're having to get rid of that. Iowa was supposed to play Ball State. Ball State is now going to play Iowa State, which is very interesting. But you're looking at this from the sense of where does the ACC go as far as scheduling? Now, one of the things they were talking about is creating pods, regional-based pods of the schedule. So, for instance, Clemson would play, and this is something we're going to get into tonight. Clemson would play Florida State, Florida State, Miami. They would play Georgia Tech. They would play all the North Carolina schools, but they would try to keep it in a region, whereas someone like Notre Dame, if they were to join, would be playing Syracuse, Boston College, Louisville, things like that, within a big radius. And one of those reasons is because they want to minimize travel. And, as we're seeing, even in baseball right now, the Nationals just said that they were not going to travel down to Miami because of the issue of the coronavirus outbreak. So it's very important to try to keep that neutralized. Now, I think that's a terrible idea. I actually don't want to go with the pod idea. I think you should just have Clemson, from Clemson speaking. If, you're going to do this, you want to bring over some of the best competition from the other division that you have. Now, granted, with this going the way it is, if they go to either 8+ or 10+, they will not have any more conference divisions. They will probably lax that for this season. Of course, the last time they had no conference divisions labels was 2005, and they brought those in Atlantic and Coastal, customary names. I think this year they would drop those, and everyone could play each other. Just the team with the best records would play each other. In that case, and folks, I want you to give me your thoughts on this. In fact, I'm going to ask for yours as well. For schedule's sake, obviously you're dropping teams that everyone calls cupcakes. You want to drop all the FCS schools. You're going to drop all the group of 5 schools. Strictly ACC and +1 non-conference. Obviously, we're assuming the non-con with South Carolina. What do you think would be the best case scenario for Clemson to add more teams from the Coastal, what we know as the Coastal?
The best case scenario for Clemson or for their strength of schedule?
For both.
Okay, so in this scenario, we'd be picking 4 Coastal teams, correct? Mm-hmm. I would have to go with Miami. Okay. Even though it is a long distance-wise, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I do think Miami will probably win 7 to 8 this year, and they're always we blow them out.
Yeah,
so
that's fun.
Virginia Tech, I think we're gonna have to go with Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is probably, I would say they're almost the consensus to win the Coastal this year. So I would say Virginia Tech. Maybe you get Virginia just as kind of that middle ground, because Virginia's probably not going to be great this year, but we don't play Virginia like ever. I know we played them in the title game last year, but I think it has been 6 seasons since we played.
We're supposed to play them already this year.
We were supposed to play them already, yes.
So they're already a part of it.
They're in the schedule.
Yes.
Okay. So Duke maybe? I can see Duke. Because Chase Bryce, that has a plot point.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do. I really don't, and I wish I did, because I feel like this is an advantage. And I will say, I do not want to play North Carolina in the regular season. And that's not because, number one, I'm not scared of North Carolina. Number two, the best scenario for Clemson would to be undefeated, playing an undefeated North Carolina in the title game. Because then if they beat an undefeated North Carolina that would be ranked in the top 10 in the title game, there would be no confusion about whether Clemson is going to go to the playoffs or not. And with this conference-only, conference +1 schedule, there could be some confusion with the amount of undefeated teams you see. We already saw 3 undefeated teams last year with Ohio State, LSU, and Clemson was the lowest seed out of all of those teams. Right. So I just don't want a scenario where there are all these undefeated teams and Clemson gets jobbed because they play in the ACC.
I think this year, though, this will specifically change that narrative. I think what's going to happen, what you're going to see is, and this is a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And folks, if you're out there watching, I want you to get your opinions on this too in the comment section. I don't think Clemson, they can have that argument with Clemson if they go conference only plus South Carolina. That's also including Notre Dame. Notre Dame's on Clemson's schedule regardless if they have a football season. Now, we know Notre Dame's schedule is contingent on them joining the ACC. Right now, they don't have a conference. The Big Ten, the Pac-12 already have nixed that. They're not going to join. Nobody else is going to join that conference. There would be too much shuffling. That's not going to happen. Right now, Notre Dame's season relies on Clemson. Before the season, before any of this stuff was happening, if everybody was looking at it before the outbreak and everything happened, let's rewind this all the way back to January. Even before the national championship game, everyone looked at the schedule in 2021 and said Clemson's best chance to get there to the playoffs again is go undefeated, and you have to go up to Indiana and beat Notre Dame in Indiana. So that was already a part of the whole deal, right? Now, a lot of the reason why people were talking about Clemson's schedule and they rag on them, and this is not independent to Clemson, exclusive to Clemson. Alabama deals with it sometimes. We've talked about this with Oregon, some of the teams in the Pac-12, where you're playing essentially cupcakes, and for whatever reason, it is what it is. Clemson will play an in-state school. They'll also play someone like Kent State, Akron this year, or they'll play Wofford or something like that. It is what it is, right? But now with an all-ACC conference plus South Carolina, including Notre Dame, depends on what happens with Notre Dame, Clemson's not going to be playing a group of 5 school whatsoever. They're not going to be playing a Power 5 school that's, bleh. They're going to be playing everyone in their conference. Now, if you're getting to cherry pick, like we just talked about, your schedule, saying, yeah, we want to add North Carolina, we want to add Virginia Tech, we want to add Miami, and we want to add Duke. All right, what you just did essentially is add 3 more teams that will be ranked to your schedule. You're already talking about Notre Dame's probably going to be ranked. They're a team that's always ranked. You're going to be talking about Florida State, who has a chance to be better this season. You're going to be talking about Louisville, who is probably going to be ranked at some point this year. That's already a couple of teams. Plus, you add those other schools, you're talking about 6 or 7 teams that Clemson could potentially play that's ranked. We could have another chaos team. We always talk about this. There could be somebody out there in the ACC that might just blow up. It ain't going to be NC State. But it could be a team out there that could blow up. What if the Dukies try to get better now under Chase Bryce? I think that's a possibility. We don't know. But Clemson's going to be playing all. And this is another thing that goes to, I'm going to branch off with this. This is very important to talk about, folks. The first thing that's most important with this is when we're talking about the top 25. We obviously know that there's the coaches poll, the AP poll. There's other polls too, but those don't matter. If you're on Twitter, you create your own stuff. But we're talking about top 25 and then the college football playoffs. If these conferences go to conference only +1 or whatever, I don't know what the model's going to be. If we're talking about that, I just find it difficult how you can actually objectively rank schools from 1 to 25 when you don't see them play anyone outside of their conference. You're talking about Clemson playing their whole slate of the ACC. Well, you're going to get some negative talk anyway, some bias, because there's people that still don't think the ACC is good. There's going to be teams, if Clemson was to play 7 ranked ACC teams, they're still going to be saying, well, those teams probably aren't that good. They just played each other. I bet if they played Vanderbilt, they'd win. False. But I'm just saying, it's one of those deals where I don't know if you can objectively do so, especially without the Big Ten in the conversation, without the Pac-12. We already talked about Ohio State being one of the, depends on who you are, could be the number 1 or 2 team in the country.
And it's a big deal. This is why I think Notre Dame needs to join the conference this year, because I don't know what their scheduling is going to look like if they don't join the conference. Drew in the back actually pointed this out to me, so thank you for this. Notre Dame would lose Wisconsin, USC, Stanford, Michigan, and probably Navy from their schedule this year, just because those teams have already came out and said that they're doing conference strictly.
Right.
So Notre Dame would lose 5 games off their schedule that all of a sudden they have to fill in. A lot of these FCS programs can't even field a team because of the funding, and I just really think that I don't know where the Notre Dame football program would go or what a season like them would look like if they did not join the ACC on a full-time basis.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get to that too, because we want to talk about that, because that's going to be the biggest molding factor and why I think the ACC is dragging their butts a little bit on making a decision where they're going to go 8+1 or 10+1. It's Notre Dame.
It's because, they're waiting it out.
Because of Notre Dame.
They're waiting Notre Dame out because they need Notre Dame. In all honesty, they need Notre Dame. And it would be so beneficial to both parties if Notre Dame would just stop being difficult and join the conference.
Well,
it would make everything a million times easier.
We are talking about a team that had ceviche for lunch before the playoffs in the selection. So they are a little bougie. But here's the deal. I'm glad you brought that up, because scheduling is going to be important too. Again, we talked about the Big Ten and the Pac-12 going ahead and doing that. So they had, I think there was 36 teams, if I'm not mistaken, 36 teams that the Big Ten and the Pac-12, the Big Ten just alone actually, was scheduled to play that were outside of their conference or an FCS or Group of 5 team. That's a lot of schools. Of those schools were pretty much Group of 5 schools. And as you guys know how this works, the Group of 5 gets paid to go and play these teams. It's not just like, Clemson just wants to schedule UConn. UConn is looking at this as a payday, and a lot of these schools are in a contract with these bigger schools to go to their school. The biggest loser of this whole deal is UCF, because UCF was going to be playing North Carolina, Georgia Tech. They had a chance.
They had more of an ACC schedule than Notre Dame did.
Yeah. So I think the biggest issue with it is the fact that if you don't have those Group of 5 schools, the problem with it is that they're in contract. You're going to see a lot of these schools potentially get sued depending on what happens with the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC. I think the Group of 5s are like the baby, right? Let's think of them as a baby. And the Big 12, the Big 10 and the Pac-12, all were going to schedule them. We all know how often the Pac-12 schedules FCS schools. All right? They were going to have those teams, and that's what was going to happen. Now that those teams are not going to allow them in, the Big 12, the FCS and the FBS schools they're just looking at Clemson, and they're looking at Alabama, they're looking at Oklahoma, and say, please play us. We need to play somebody. We don't have anything. And those schools are like, hey, I don't know about all that. We want to do our own thing, but we'll consider that. Problem with that, okay? If you think about this, is again the contracts. A lot of these are one of those contracts is like you don't have a chance to get out of it unless it's force majeure or an act of God. Those three words right there, act of God, would basically be the argument for the ACC, the Big 12, or the SEC to say, hey, we can't help what happened to you. We've got to do our thing. You guys just schedule yourselves. They're looking for a payday. Otherwise, there is no reason why Alcorn State would want to go to Alabama and get 100 put on them. They just want to go and get paid. So that's going to be another factor to all of this. But you brought up Notre Dame. The reason why that's important is because Notre Dame, outside of the ACC slate that they have, which is 6 games, they play the Stanford, they play the USC, they play the Wisconsin, they play the BYU, they play the Navy, right?
Michigan too.
Michigan too. So here's the problem with that. If you cut all of those other schools, you're not playing anybody but what conference?
The ACC.
The ACC.
That's exactly the point I was trying to prove.
The ACC. So, in my opinion, Notre Dame needs the ACC way more than the ACC needs Notre Dame at this point. The ACC finally has firepower. They finally have the strength to be able to strong-arm Notre Dame into joining the conference. They can use this as bargaining power for future Notre Dame participation in the ACC in football. That would make them officially a member of the ACC. They're in the ACC in field hockey.
Which
why
is
not
literally
football?
long overdue. I don't understand why Notre Dame, I get that the profit with NBC and the TV and...
That's exactly what we're going to talk about.
Yes.
So the profit with the ACC is not as big as it would be as they have the NBC contract, folks. They have that contract. It's been long-standing. They make a lot of money to have their games exclusively on NBC. Here's the deal. You need the ACC to have a schedule. If you can't, 6 games is not going to cut it for you. Even if they did the 8+1, that's still 7. And for those people who took their math at North Carolina, that's not enough games on the schedule. So what's going to end up happening is Notre Dame is going to have to join the ACC or go and play all of those little baby FCS schools and Group of 5 schools to be able to have a season, right? This is something that's important for everybody out there to remember. If Notre Dame is playing all of those Group of 5 teams, they're playing all those FCS schools, you ain't getting in the playoffs. I don't care if you're 12-0. I don't care if you go 50-0. They're not going to look at you the same as if you beat North Carolina, you beat Florida State, you beat Clemson, you beat all of these schools in the ACC. You can still have your +1 with a team out there that you want.
Like Wisconsin.
Not Wisconsin because they're in the Big Ten. You can go and schedule Oklahoma. Oklahoma needs a team. Right now they're not playing Tennessee. Well, maybe they are. I don't know.
Oklahoma State needs a team, too, if I'm not mistaken.
Oklahoma State needs a team. Iowa State needs a team. A lot of these teams need somebody to play, and these are still Power 5 conferences. You get a win from a team in the Big 12 or the SEC. If you're Notre Dame, well, you're not going to get a win in the ACC if you're Notre Dame. I don't think that's happening. But, you see what I'm saying? That's going to be most important. So they need the ACC more over than ever now. The biggest deal, here's something to think about. We talk about that NBC contract. Mm-hmm. Well, this is very pivotal for Notre Dame. Notre Dame needs to join and make a decision, and it needs to be pretty fast. I think they need to go forward because at some point, the contract negotiations with the ACC, with NBC, are going to end. In fact, in 2025, that is the end of the contract negotiation of the NBC Notre Dame relationship, whatever you want to call them. The problem with it, though, that's the exact same time that the college football playoffs are going to get together and decide if they want to go to 6, 8, 12. At that point in time, you might want to join a conference. That way you can get a conference championship. And
so
if
you have
lose
a guaranteed spot if the playoff
you can get in there.
Because if Notre Dame ends up as an independent, and I know they've been favored by the committee in the past, they've made the playoff before, But if Notre Dame ends up as an independent and all of these champions of the conferences are guaranteed playoff spots in an expanded playoff format, that really screws Notre Dame over. Because that means that they don't have any sort of guaranteed spot and they don't control their own destiny at that point. It would be up to what, if a committee values them, who's playing an independent and playing the schedule that they have, which is not very strong typically, right, over a team that, let's say Florida is a one-loss, they go undefeated and they lose to Alabama in the championship game. Who do you think the committee's going to pick in that scenario? And it's not going to be Notre Dame. So I think that Notre Dame needs to just join the conference now, bite the bullet, lose a couple $1 million with the NBC deal possibly, split some of their profits, but in turn, you will make that money back by possibly going to a playoff, possibly by playing in the ACC championship game, stuff like that. They need to function like a normal team does.
Yeah, an enterprise, essentially. And if you think about this, if you were to add Notre Dame, first of all, Notre Dame is a cash cow. The playoffs always want Notre Dame to be there, regardless if they're good or not, folks. They want Notre Dame to be there because they know Notre Dame has some ridiculous fans, tons of them out there across the world that will tune in and watch them in the playoffs like they did in a 30-3 loss to Clemson just a couple years ago. That's what they want. They want Notre Dame in. Here's the big deal, though. Another thing that's got people grinding their gears a little bit. If Notre Dame is to play an ACC schedule but not officially join the ACC, do you think it would be fair you talked about North Carolina getting to the ACC championship and playing Clemson. Well, if Notre Dame is on the schedule and playing everybody out there, they're playing North Carolina and all those teams, there's a good chance that Notre Dame could potentially be in the conference championship. Do you think that Notre Dame should be able to play in the conference championship if they are not a member of the ACC?
No, definitely not. Like, why would – and this is what makes me angry about Notre Dame and the way that they operate. They are eligible to play and have played in the conference championship game in every single other sport except for football. So I don't understand why they won't just bite the bullet here and integrate themselves as a full-time ACC team.
If this is about money, the ACC has to understand that they have the power right now. If you're Notre Dame, you have to understand that the ACC is already making moves to make more money. You got to think about the ACC network, all the partnerships that they've created. You're talking about one of the best teams in college football, not just the best team in their conference or just a really good team in Clemson Tigers, being in the conference championship every year and winning it, being in the playoffs, winning it 2 out of 4. It's very important that Notre Dame join and see that. Maybe they can get some of that momentum. We've talked about that. They get a chance in basketball. They get a chance in baseball. Why wouldn't you want to get a chance to go and play against Clemson and maybe usurp Clemson to become the next team of the ACC? North Carolina's trying to do it. They're not backing out. Of course, they are a member of the ACC. But if you're Notre Dame, this is win-win. Again, we talked about this. You can still go and schedule somebody out of conference. That's a big-time game. It doesn't have to be Michigan or Wisconsin or USC. Again, the whole SEC is waiting on the ACC to do it. The whole Big 12 is waiting. If you want, you can even get a little spicy and go schedule somebody like UCF. But you can still have an out-of-conference and not just play the ACC. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're scared. Maybe it's the weirdness and the fumes of that, the metallic helmets that are coming off into them and making them scared. I don't know what it is. Maybe they just don't want to have to play Clemson every year. I wouldn't blame them. But the thing is, you have to understand this is bigger than just 2020. This is beyond. And no one's saying you have to join the ACC for the next 100 years. You can maybe even join the ACC for the next 10 years. Again, that contract negotiation with NBC ends in 2025. So what if you only joined for 5 years? It is what it is. I think a decision needs to be made. I'm tired of Notre Dame waffling. I'm tired of people bending their will to them. The ACC as a whole has more power over that team than that team has over the ACC. So I'm going to leave it at that. But while we're at it, let's go ahead and talk about scheduling. Let's go ahead and make that schedule. So if I'm a Clemson fan, I think you've already done this, but I want to add North Carolina. I want to.
I'm going to have to disagree with you.
I want to add North Carolina. I want to add North Carolina because of two factors. One, North Carolina is going to be better on your resume. And two, teams know that the second time you play Clemson, especially after it was close, there's a good chance you're going to get blown out. Think about those games with Syracuse, and everybody's like, oh, man, Syracuse is going to be that next team to beat Clemson. They beat them in 2017. In 2018, it was close. They almost lost it. Trevor Lawrence went down and yada, yada, yada. Well, what happened in 2019? It was bad. It was really, really, really bad. So that's why I'm thinking, in my opinion, I would love to get North Carolina on the schedule, beat them up really good. You put Virginia Tech on the schedule. They're the next team that everyone's looking at to be really, really good. You add Miami. They just made De'Aaron King the starter, like we all didn't know that was going to happen. You thought Tate Martell was going to win. Get out of here with that. And then I would probably say, I would venture to add, well, we're already playing Georgia Tech, so that's one team from what we would call the Coastal. I would actually say I would add Pitt. I think Pitt's defense is going to get them to a place where they're going to be very, very competitive. If you go back to the episode that we talked, I told you North Carolina is going to lose to them. I think Pitt, coupled with their offense getting better, you got a fourth-year quarterback in Kenny Pickett. I think Pitt's going to be an 8-9 win team, especially if they're playing ACC only. They don't have to play Penn State. That's one loss you can take away from their schedule. I think there's a good chance that Pitt would be a really good team. And then you add, of course, South Carolina Gamecocks at the end of the year. I don't know what's going to happen with them. We'll see. But I think that this college football season can be saved. I think they can do it right. I think, unfortunately, the ACC is being pressured into doing it. Again, a decision could be made as early as tomorrow as far as what they're going to do, what model they're going to go after, how they're going to make football happen in the fall. I know a lot of people were talking about that spring football. I'm just going to go out there and put it out there, folks. Spring football would be absolutely terrible. I know the Ivy League and another conference, can't remember, is going to play their football in the spring. Those teams can do that because, to be fair, quite frankly, Harvard players are not looking to go to the NFL. Sure, there are players to go to NFL from there, Ryan Fitzmagic, but those guys usually are aspiring to be like your lawyers, your politicians, your doctors, Rhodes Scholar type guy. They're not looking to go and make bank in the NFL. They got other aspirations. You're talking about a guy from, like, I don't know, a lower level player from Texas Tech who's, looked at as like what, the number 7 player in his position in the NFL draft. If you're the number 7 or you're number, let's say even lower, you're number 3 in your class. You're Trevor Lawrence. Everybody sees what's happening with the Patriots. All their players are just opting out for the 2020 season. Tom Brady's already gone. They're going to be trash. They want Trevor Lawrence. Let's make no mistake about it. They want Trevor Lawrence. When that happens, you're going to have players, if they have the chance to opt out, say, I'm opting out. It's the spring. I could be working out with an NFL guy right now to get my, cred up for the NFL. Why would I play in spring football league? So I think it's important that they get this done soon and they get this done right so we can have football in the fall. Do you think that we're going to have any – of course, it also changes when we start the season. Mm-hmm. If we go to more than 11 games – there's a chance that we lose a bye week. I talked about this earlier in the show. If you lose a bye week, that's detrimental. Anybody remembers the Clemson 2015 team, the one that didn't really have a bye week until the end of the year? They were all hurt. Ben Bower didn't have a shoulder. It was terrible. It was ridiculous. I'm surprised they held up in the playoffs. I'm surprised they held up as well as they did against Alabama. I think if Clemson had a bye week that year or an earlier bye week, they can get healthy again. Mm-hmm. I think that they could have probably beaten Alabama. They could have beaten Alabama anyway if it weren't for O.J. Howard.
They should have beaten
They should have.
And Mackenzie Alexander, hamstring.
Oh, man.
One of the most devastating.
Let's not even talk about it. But I think it's important to have a bye week. And so that would move, obviously week 0 starts in August for a lot of schools. If you're wanting to watch Hawaii play Memphis or something, you can watch that. But most games are going to start either late August or early September. I think right now, Clemson, Georgia Tech, early in the year is supposed to be September 12th or something like that. Of course, that would be moved back to the 19th or something, 18th. Of course, you want to shift your schedule, so that's very important. Do you think that we'll see any crazy, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think Clemson will be Clemson will have to delay their season super far?
I don't want to be the pessimist on the show.
See, there we go.
But I'm not entirely confident that the season will be starting on time, though I do think that we will be playing football. I do think that we will get the NFL and we will get college football. I think that the fact that these are college athletes instead of pro athletes makes things a lot more difficult because you don't have the option of a league like the NHL, the NBA, and the MLS are the three leagues that have done the bubble format.
Yep.
And all three of them have now for a month plus reported 0 positive tests.
Yeah.
So the bubble format works. College football doesn't have that luxury because of, number one, the location of the teams. Number two, there's no common ground that they could all meet at. These kids have to go to class and they have to participate in school. So this isn't a professional sport where these people are getting paid. And for that reason, it makes things a lot more complicated due to location and travel. Do I think we will play football? Yes. Do I think that it will be with either limited fans or no fans? Also, yes. Do I think that the season could possibly get delayed? I think that that's almost a definite at this point. But I do think that we will eventually return to some sort of normalcy during the football season. And I think that there's a chance you could play that national title game with fans. I think that should probably be the goal.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if we're talking 2021, we're hoping for those of you that will do the vaccine that there'll be some kind of vaccine, some kind of medical intervention for the pandemic. We'll be on the outskirts of that. That'll be another time, an afterthought. Maybe we'll have an opportunity where the national championship game could be played. Of course, again, if you delay the schedule too much, you're going to be peeling into your conference championship game. You might have to move that back. I'm sure there was some talk about not having a conference championship game, especially, again, we talked about Notre Dame. If they are not officially a member but playing a full schedule, should they get in there? I mean, that's going to be weird, especially if they get in the playoffs without having to even play a conference championship game. So I think that's weird. And like you said, there's a lot of different things happening. Some schools' protocols are just not the same. This is why I think the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC are kind of joining together where the Pac-12 and Big 10 did to try to come together to get a common ground of how they're going to handle all their protocols for the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, if you think about it, if you compare Clemson's or Florida's or Oklahoma's medical staff with Wyoming or BYU or somebody like that, let's even say even more extreme, Vanderbilt, they are a medical school. A lot of that is medical. Their protocol is not going to be the same as these bigger schools. They don't have the same budget. What is testing like there? How do we know? This is why you can't do a bubble. And we're already seeing now that there's some teams that can't do that in general. I'm reading here, Michigan State and Rutgers actually sent their entire team into quarantine. The entire team, just because a couple of guys, they wanted to do that, the whole team.
And football in general makes things a lot more difficult because you have so many, there are so many people on the team that could possibly, like, literally one person and you're in the locker room and boom, the whole team has it. And you saw it with even the Marlins and the MLB.
Yep.
Like, 22 of their players have coronavirus.
Yeah, like I said, the Nationals just basically said, we're not going down there. We're not dealing with that.
And I don't blame them.
I don't blame them either.
It's just one of those things where, and once again, MLB does not have the bubble format.
That's right.
And I think that because their PA refused pretty much to play in the bubble. So I think that there's a good chance that the season gets delayed. But still, I still do think we'll play. I really do think we'll play.
I think so, too. I think, and obviously, the NCAA Board of Governors are getting together on Friday to make another decision. That decision will be basically heavily weighed off of what the conferences do. Again, I think that's going to be a domino effect. We saw shortly after the Big Ten announced, the Pac-12 went ahead and announced. I think the same thing's going to happen. They're just trying to get all those agreements together, getting the schedule together, getting the legal work of not playing group of 5 schools.
I do want to say that a part of the reason that I think it will be delayed isn't exactly because of the virus.
Right.
I think it's because it's been, the scheduling and stuff has been pushed back this far to where you're going to have to scramble, you're going to have to schedule tickets if there's going to be fans, you're going to have to figure out if you're playing with fans or no fans. There is so much stuff that still has to happen before you even step foot on that game for the most meaningless game of the season.
Well, one of the biggest things to actually think about when you're debating a lot of this too is, like you said, you brought up a lot of good points. It's not necessarily the virus right now. What happens if you're in week 4 and you have 4 or 5 teams with a complete outbreak,
yes,
you have to have some kind of weak basis to try to see what you can do.
And you have to formulate a backup plan. And like this stuff is going to take time because of the situation that we're in. And that's why, exactly, I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's not the virus right now that is concerning to why we would possibly get delayed. There are just so many things that have to take place, and there's so many plans and protocols that have to be put into action before you can step on that field. Because like you said, what if Clemson trots down to Miami week 6, just making up something for the point of it, and they get down there and you realize that 30 of the Miami players have COVID. There was like one outbreak, and then they tested the whole team, and now 30 of them have COVID. So now Clemson has to drive back up, and now they have no one to play.
Yep.
So there has to be some sort of backup plan, and I think that one of the proposed things was maybe like a portal of teams that could possibly get.
Dan Radakovich, actually.
Dan Radakovich,
yeah.
Yes, great job by him. So Dan Radakovich proposed this portal of teams that could possibly pop in and play in case of an emergency outbreak, in case a team couldn't play for whatever reason, doesn't feel comfortable, etc. And I feel like that's a good idea, but all the semantics and all the technicalities are just going to have to be put into stone before you can play.
Yeah,
because you can't go into this unprepared. If you go into this unprepared, you're asking for a season cancellation, and that is the worst possible case scenario.
Absolutely, and again, that's why the NCAA is trying to drag their feet on this. Look, folks, to be honest with you, I am not a pessimist at all. I think we're going to play football this year. I think we're going to see some good football. But we are in no reasonable situation to believe that we can have a rational take on the cases of coronavirus going away. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think at best we can flatten the curve. But that's going to take a lot more than just people wearing masks. It's going to have to take people being diligent, and that's going to have to take people being inside, unfortunately, in the bubble, like you said. Here's a good question, a thing for you to ponder on. And this is something that a lot of schools don't really think about. But it's very, very important to every school. I'm talking about it is of the utmost importance that they figured this out. Now, we've seen a little bit of this at Clemson. We saw Kelly Bryant leave. We saw Hunter Johnson leave. We saw Zarek Cooper leave. You know, you had Kelly Bryant, Hunter Johnson, Trevor Lawrence, Chase Bryce on the team. Well, those two guys leave. What happens when Trevor Lawrence gets hurt? You have Chase Bryce. What happens if Chase Bryce gets hurt? You have Hunter Renfrow or Christian Wilkins playing quarterback for him, which I wanted Christian Wilkins to get a snap, by the way. Now, what happens if you are a team, say Clemson, knock on wood right here. I'm not a superstitious person, but I'm a little stitious today about this. Right? Trevor Lawrence gets coronavirus. He gives it to somebody else in the quarterback room. They're all in the same quarterback room.
And
then all your quarterbacks get coronavirus. Now you're on some guy, Jimmy Greenbeans. If you're not a Clemson fan, you should look that guy up. He's actually a 6-star recruit. You have Jimmy Greenbeans playing quarterback for you. Is it going to be one of the situations where, and I think I heard somebody talking about this, you have a quarterback being bubbled out somewhere. He does not even join the quarterback room. Do you have all your quarterbacks at home in their dorms, not coming out on their pads, doing all the game plan, watching film? How do you handle that? What happens at running back? Look, I hate to say this. If Travis Etienne gets coronavirus, that's fine. We can still win with the plethora of the running backs that we have there. But if Trevor Lawrence goes down, and then DJ goes down, and then Tyson Pumachan goes down, we got Patrick McClure. There's a lot of Clemson fans who don't even know who Patrick McClure is. After that, you have Ben Batson. You got to bring him back over from defense, and after that, see if one of the receivers can play.
Let me just phrase it. It would be a nightmare.
It would be an absolute nightmare.
It would be a nightmare if that were to happen.
But that's the thing. It's not just for Clemson. That goes for every school. Think about some of those schools that don't have the quarterback depth that Clemson has. I was watching a couple of episodes of Last Chance U today. And folks, the new one's out. This is the last football one, so go and watch it. It's Laney College in California. They had a starting quarterback get hurt. Their backup quarterback get hurt. Their third-string quarterback get hurt. And guess what happens? Their fourth-string quarterback gets hurt. So then they bring over a wide receiver who's 5'8", and, hey, he actually starts to make it electric, but we all know that this is like D2 football, so I don't know about all that. But I'm not saying it's not possible to be successful. Obviously, we saw Lynn Bowden do it last year. He turned the Wildcats into a triple option team that ended up beating Virginia Tech somehow in the bowl game. He was the worst looking quarterback out there, but the kid was a phenomenal athlete. I'm not saying that I don't think Clemson could get past it. I don't necessarily know that they can win a national championship without any of the 3 quarterbacks that we are banking on right now, but I don't know, folks. It's going to be interesting. Like I said, the thing that I'm most interested in seeing how it works out is the legal ramifications for not paying or being out of the contract for a lot of these Group of 5 schools and FCS schools. They rely on them. But maybe this is the change that we need. Maybe this is the change that will finally bring everybody to shut up about conferences and who's playing what on whose schedule. If Clemson's getting to play everybody in their conference, plus South Carolina from the big bad SEC and Notre Dame, then who could you say that they're playing that's a cupcake? Which team could be a cupcake? Last I checked, there's a lot of schools in the ACC that could beat schools in other conferences. We've seen it happen. And then you won't have that conversation anymore. Problem is, I think the Power 5 schools should not be relied on as big daddy to some of these Group of 5 schools. I think these Group of 5 schools need to do a little bit better. Granted, they do not have the money and endowment that someone like Alabama or Penn State or Ohio State has, but you could start to force that to make something up. We're already talking about now how we're going to get the Group of 5 into the playoffs. Are they ever going to get in there? Maybe this is the change. What if this change goes beyond 2020? That's something a lot of people aren't thinking about. Maybe these schedule changes will eventually go on in the future. If you have a schedule that's 8 teams, and then you have 2 out of conference, and then, let's do 10 and then 2 out of conference. You could still go play, if you're Clemson, you play 10 teams from the ACC. You could still go play Oregon or A&M or South Carolina, and then South Carolina. So you can still have that. Maybe this format might go beyond 2020. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I just hope we
get it.
It's
Like in the MLB, how the universal DH, people think that's just going to stick.
Yeah.
So maybe some of these changes just stick.
Maybe they should. And that's where we are right now. But, folks, we're at the end of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you for rocking with 4th and 16, as I said already. You should be able to watch this again on replay on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Please like and share. Send this to all your friends, anybody that likes football. Again, give me your thoughts in the comment section. If you're watching this after it's done, just give me your thoughts in the comment section. I want to know how you feel about Notre Dame joining the ACC. I want to know how you feel about the top 25 rankings in the college football playoff rankings. I think that's going to be a little wonky. And then I also want to know how you feel about Group of 5 schools just not really being included in the Power 5 if they're not going to get a chance to get into the playoffs anyway. So, folks, have a great night. I appreciate you being there, and I will see you next Tuesday. I think we're going to do another Tuesday mailbag. Of course, you can do that by tweeting Ellis Tolbert on Twitter, sending us a message on Facebook, or just sending us an email at etolbertspeaks@gmail.com. Have a great night, and I'll see you next week.